And this is a very early photograph from one of the coalition meetings. And actually the woman there in the middle is holding her first election poster, which against all design sort of knowledge was designed by committee. You shouldn't really design election poster by committee. However, we came up with a cartoon dinosaur which said, "Say goodbye to dinosaurs." And some of the other parties took great exception to this because they said, "Oh, you call us a dinosaur?" We didn't actually call you a dinosaur, but if you want to self-identify, please do that standing. However, in terms of agreeing to set up the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition, what we did was, once we got the name on the wavelength of the Northern Ireland office, we invited as many women as we could to 3 collective meetings to sort of say, look, we have this opportunity here. We've had all these discussions. We know that there's a lot of women that are already members of existing political parties, and that's where their allegiance lies. But we feel that if we are to get women at the peace talks table, we have to do something. And we're not going to get it through existing political parties. So eventually, we had enough consensus to set up the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition. Now, we deliberately called it a coalition rather than a party, because we sort of said, look, we're not really ever going to be sort of a party of government. So what we want to do is we want to be as inclusive as possible, rather than a strict adherence to a narrow policy line. And we certainly in the first 5 or 6 years of the coalition, we sort of said, and people can be members of other parties and be members of the coalition. So we left it open for dual membership. So we did have a number of people that were members of other parties who were also members of the coalition, because they sort of, a number of some of the ones that I talked to, that are felt, but they said, look, we can still be, in one case, there was a woman that's the Alliance Party, but she said, well, I'm not getting anywhere in terms of being elected to the Alliance Party, but in the coalition, I can have a say and still maintain my Alliance membership. So we had a number of people like that. We also sort of said, again on the basis of inclusivity, if we are never going to be Minister for Agriculture, there is no point having a detailed poultry policy or fish rearing policy. So instead, rather than wasting time on that, we will have 3 principles. And the 3 principles were human rights, equality, and inclusion. And to be honest, I mean, those principles really stood us in good stead. Because what we sort of essentially did was, any issues that came up, we discussed them through the lens of those principles. And it's a bit like my example from the early trade union movement and strip searching. It actually allowed a broadening of the discussion without people immediately taking up positions of, oh, that's anti-unionist or that's anti-Republican. You were sort of saying, from the point of view of equality, what is our position on this issue? And the other thing that we did was, which again was very important, was we sort of said, look, we're in a divided society. We will have a shared leadership. And one of the leaders will come from a nationalist Republican Catholic background, and the other from a unionist loyalist Protestant background. So that when people look at the coalition, they can see their own identity at leadership level. And it was fascinating because one of the things the media could not get their head around was a shared leadership. Because they would always ring up and say, we want to talk to your leader. I say, which one? And it was actually amazing, things like that you didn't actually foresee were actually always real barriers. So that the formal politics is so set in people's minds, there has to be one leader. The leader has to sort of drive the party, if you like. And it has to be, where is your policy on, the environment or the extension of the M1 motorway or whatever else it was, that people are very set in their idea of politics. And that led us to actually talk about, and particularly those of us that came from the broader civil society movement, how can we change politics? which is almost a much bigger project than just the peace talks. However, when we emerged and we formally set up the coalition 6 weeks before the election to the peace talks. So it's a major sort of drive forward. From the DUP side, the unionist Peter Robinson was basically saying, Constitution's got wrong. Anyway, these people weren't around whenever we were fighting to maintain the Constitution of Northern Ireland. And similarly, from the sort of the Sinn Féin side, actually, they were attacking the Women's Coalition because proper consultation hadn't been undertaken before the decision was taken to contest the election. Actually, the letter that came from was signed by 10 women's organisations in West Belfast, and 7 of them had actually invited to the talks, that were setting up the coalition. But from both sides, in fact, from virtually all the parties, they will say, who are these people, and they're a cult. James Mallon said that. And the other thing that happened, which I think is probably fairly standard, very often the established parties put up a woman member to attack the coalition. So it was, trying to sort of say, look, there's no need for this, women are in our parties anyway. But one of the reasons that we set up the coalition, and Monica McWilliams and myself will argue about this, she sort of says, no, we definitely set it up to win these seats. My memory is actually that we didn't have the obvious notion of winning the seats, because we had 6 weeks to fight the election, basically. We set it up to annoy the other parties, and we set it up to challenge the media representation of women, because the other parties would quite often say, oh, we'd love to put women forward, but we can't find them. They won't stand, or it's too demanding for them, So one of the reasons we set up the coalition was to puncture that particular argument. And because it was gathering votes from right across Northern Ireland, it enabled us to set up, to encourage a lot of women to stand. And the situation, as we were going into the 1996 period, was difficult. The top slide there shows Canary Wharf. The IRA ceasefire had just broken down because the interpretation of what the basic agreement was different between Sinn Féin and the British government. British government were saying no more would go out decommissioning of arms. Sinn Féin was saying that was never agreed. So the Canary Wharf bombing took place, and indeed some other shootings over the period. We had the parades issue, which was particularly divisive in that mid-1990s period. That was Drumcree, where standoffs between the traditional Orange Order parades and the nationalist resistance. We had dissension within the loyalist paramilitary groups. You can't really see that. It's quite like that one, actually. It was the Lord Shanklin, where they basically had this graffiti saying, "Shove your nose." I always think it's because the European Union peace programme had a dog logo, "Shove your nose." And then, obviously, the whole decommissioning issue, that was Adam speaking about that there. So it was a difficult circumstances that we were in. However, the talks, or the elections went ahead, and that was the headline whenever the Women's Coalition came in. It's the 9th party out of the 10 parties elected at these talks. Hen party leaves the nest in style. The other interesting thing, that's Telegraph, but I think they thought they were being supported. The other interesting thing was by lunchtime, whenever the election results came in, they had 10 silhouettes representing the 10 parties being elected at the talks, and they were all silhouettes of men, because they had ties. And by the evening edition, they took the tie off one of them. So we had 30 parties were registered. The coalition was knighted at 10 parties. And what actually gave the coalition confidence during the election campaign was we got in Sidney Elliott, who was a political science professor at Queen's University, but his speciality was in electoral systems. And he said, look, he analysed the previous election in Northern Ireland, the local elections. He said, if you get 10,000 votes, you can get elected. So we said 100 votes for 100 women. So the idea was to actually stand 100 women. we actually stood at the end, I think, about 95. So what we did was, we said, right, particularly because parties kept saying we can't find women, we said we put an ad in the paper, 3 papers, to be inclusive. I say, we're looking for women who are interested in politics, who would subscribe to equality, human rights and inclusion, for consideration to stand in these elections. And we got 95 names. We put them all on the ballot sheets, and now some, in fairness, did say to us, look, I'll stand, but promise me we won't be elected. So, but the idea was the more women you put up, I mean, even if they're family and extended friendship network voted for them, the more votes you were garnering. So we stood them in all the different 18 constituencies across Northern Ireland. And we came in, I think we got 7,800 votes. And again, Sydney was right, you know, because again, when somebody looks at challenging an electoral system, say, it's such a massive machine, you know, and you'll need thousands and thousands of votes. And actually, that bit of study gave people the confidence to say, no, we can do it. And then we set up constituency groups in each of the 18 constituencies. Because alongside the peace talks, there was also votes to this Forum for Dialogue and Understanding, which 110 seats. And that was a SOC, basically, to the broader parties, so that their representatives could have somewhere to meet. It had really no role. In fact, Monica always called it the Forum for Monologue and Misunderstanding, because they really sort of spent their time arguing with each other. But only 15 women were turned out of the 110, which shows, you know, the parties weren't putting them forward. And that includes, excuse me, the 2 from Women's Coalition. And of the candidates of that election, the Green Party, small party here, put up 41% women candidates, Sinn Féin 32%, UUP 9%. So it sort of went down. So what was important was, from that period, the nature of the electoral system was important, that trying to demystify politics to make it manageable. In fact, there's some great stories. Some of the women from in Fermanagh went into the local police station the night before the vote and said they were holding some meetings, didn't say they were from the coalition. So the police assumed they were on local community issues and lent them their loudhailer equipment. So the women used the loudhailer equipment then to sort of whip up the vote and then take it back to the police the next day. Moving away from personalities to teamwork. Because again, what we tried to do was, again, on the basis of including as many people as possible, we set up teams around different aspects of the talks, but also of the forum. But again, you know, politics doesn't generally work like that. It does tend to be personalities all the time that you get. Remembering the importance of the technicalities. I mean, people who are involved in peace talks, you know, tend to look at substantive issues. The technicalities that underpin the peace talks are vital. I have here, largely because I was tidying the other day, a copy of the letter sent by the Northern Ireland office to Monica in June 1996, which was just after the election. It was sent care of the Northern Ireland Women's Rights Centre, Women's Centre. Anyway, and it actually details the outline of these talks. I mean, you can always write the Good Friday Agreement in terms of its framing on the basis of what's in this. So that was done before anybody met, you know, which again shows. So it was the civil servants, you know, from both the British and Irish governments that were doing that. So that, who's doing that backroom framing, and what are their assumptions and what are their values that they're bringing situation. And that's rarely questioned who those people are. And similarly, you know, by the following, this was actually even earlier. This was April 1996. The ground rules for substantive all-party negotiations, that came out before the election. So, you know, again, which basically sort of saying, you know, the chairing of it, who's doing the different committees and stuff like that. So we weren't even conscious, to be honest, when we were going to peace talks, of all that work behind the scenes. So in future, you know, anybody going into that situation, the importance of being conscious of who's doing the technicalities and what format we're taking, because that's going to influence the amount of say that you have as the negotiations proceed. And then obviously, for us, we put a lot of energy into constant trying to bring the membership with us, constant meetings, report backs all the time. Because again, in peace talks, and sometimes you can understand that, it becomes so detailed and so intense that there's a small elite of people involved, and they forget to bring their own members with them. Now, Sinn Féin was brilliant at this. I mean, they had people going out all the time to report back, because they were terrified of us splitting the membership. So constantly. Unionist Party very rarely did it. And I always remember we actually had over, through Civil Society, actually, through the Community Foundation for Northern Ireland, where I was working at the time, we had over a Sandinista woman who had been actually commander in Nicaragua. And she talked about how during their peace talks, the Sandinistas were sending out people every Saturday, to talk, to explain what was happening. And again, Ruth Mayer from the South African negotiations, he was on the nationalist side, National Party. He talked about that importance of constantly bringing people with you, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And then we had the internal dynamics of actually trying to grow the coalition, while we were also trying to look at how to engage in the peace talks. And I actually found a scrap of paper which I drawn up, I think to inform discussion and at the agenda at the time. But so you had to look at your organisational structure. How did you keep things going throughout 18 constituency? Again, forming those teams, both for the talks and the forum. We had to look at sort of standard stuff like, a database in terms of our members and supporters. And the money, I mean, we fought that election on £15,000. And I always remember we got a grant from the Global Fund for Women, which is an American-based philanthropic organisation, of, I think, about 5,000. And then Joseph Rowntree Reform Trust, which is a non-charitable bit of Joseph Rowntree, gave us about the same. And then it was individual women's contributions, but because it was all that sort of structure as well, the fundraising. We had to have internal communications to ensure people were being brought along, then named responsibilities for different aspects of the work. So we would have had Barbara McCabe, God rest her, who was responsible. She was responsible for parades and marches before. And we had somebody else responsible for looking at policing, somebody else for prisoners. So there's all different topics that were coming up. Research papers, and then the external communication, and then setting an office. Because one of the things that, and I think it's true of women more than men, but I generalise, but certainly we had, so that we don't know everything. We need expertise in terms perhaps of the economy, if there's issues of the economy coming up, particularly if you talk about cross-borders, whatever else. So who out there is a sympathetic ally to have a seminar, to have some discussion around this? Because, and I think it's not just politicians, but it's the public's expectation of politicians is they can never admit to not knowing things. We always expect them to come out and sort of say, yes, this is the answer, and cover them if they get it wrong or whatever else, rather than them actually sort of saying, well, actually, we're going to go out and talk to people about this. So it's almost creating space for politicians to do that. And we were upfront and we sort of said, well, look, we don't know, and we're new in this thing, and we want to talk to as many people as possible. And through that, expanding your sort of both membership base and your ally base. And then there's external context, so the importance of building relationships and building relationships with the other political parties that were involved in the talks. And that was actually interesting because two particular examples I mentioned that demonstrated the use of our principles. So for our was inclusion. So inclusion came up because the IRA ceasefire broken down, Sinn Féin were excluded from the talks. So we said, right, we have a principle of inclusion, so we will continue to meet them and brief them, and we did, right through the period when they were outside. And later on, whenever some of the loyalist parties were put out, we did the same thing. And the other thing was, this adopting counterintuitive points of contact. So it came up, a woman approached us to say her daughter was being held in prison in England on remand. She was being strip searched constantly. She was 6 months pregnant, and she wanted Monica to go over and visit her in the prison in England. So we discussed this. We said, right, on human rights principle, we're going to send somebody over. We didn't send Monica. We sent Jane Wild, who was a medical doctor and a Protestant. Because Monica had gone and come back and sort of said, look, this is ridiculous. People said, oh, she would say that, wouldn't she? I mean, the woman's in for being a Republican, and she's just required to shoot for her. Whereas, with Jane Wild, when she came back, they couldn't say that, because he was a medical doctor who was from a Protestant background. So that counterintuitive thing, which actually then won you more space for the discussion. And similarly in the talks, we would try, so if we're discussing the early release of political prisoners, we would ensure that on our team for that were people from a Protestant background where there was going to be more issues around that. And similarly vice versa, in terms of some other issues. The importance of responding to talks, forum and position papers, and we were really good at doing our homework. I mean, we responded to every paper, because what would happen in terms of the talks process is you would have a paper produced perhaps by the civil servants and the British and Irish government, and again, it was and I don't think we were as conscious at the time of that, who was actually creating the framing of those papers, invariably them. And then each party would be asked to do a response paper, and then they would be shared between parties, and then the parties would have to go off and talk to each other about it, and then feed the conclusions back to Senator George Mitchell, who would then put out some sort of composite paper for further discussion. So it was a very draining process, but and from our point of view, it actually allowed us to involve as many people as possible in it. I mentioned about getting policy points and ideas from civil society. For example, we did it, but I think that Sinn Féin did it as well. I mean, perhaps other parties, the Committee for the Administration of Justice, when it came to the details of the human rights, the Bill of Rights, we asked Margaret Ryan, who's then the director of that, to draft our submission. So say, look, we don't have this insight they have. And so we had victims of violence. We went to some of the victims groups to say, you tell us what you want. We put it in. And the importance of drawing on international experience. I mentioned the contacts we had, because again, and with us particularly in South Africa was an obvious example, and some of the negotiations in Central America. So I do remember reading the Guatemalan peace agreement at 12 o'clock at night, and the whole section on land rights, so pass me by basically, and identifying potential allies where we could find them. And some of those potential allies, I mean, we had, there's two there, in fact, with Labour administration coming in 1997, we had the first ever woman Secretary of State, woman. She was a really important ally for us, because her office staff would try and block the Women's Coalition getting in because we were a small party, beneath their notice. So we had this code with Mo. We would meet her and we just do that. She said, right, we'll see you in the ladies' loo. So we would meet the ladies' loo and she would brief us as swans were on. And then, of course, on an international basis, Clinton was important in terms of she was very interested in women's participation, and she particularly took Monica and Pearl Sager, who was the other leader for the policy community, under her wing, and would introduce them to various both expertise, I suppose, but also points of influence. So there was the sort of the international sort of side of things, but then it wasn't all plain sailing, because equally we really had to work hard to try to get any sort of purchase power from the DUP, and that says they really weren't talking to us, But you would have to keep asking for meetings in terms of being true to that sort of inclusive approach. And then, but alongside that, and to the extent I think, with the benefit of hindsight, we didn't, but because this was so intense, and there was so much going on and so much work to be done, we didn't really pay enough attention to what was going on at community level for the women who perhaps did not join the coalition. Some because they were supporting other political parties, others because they were still, a bit wary. Where was this politics going to go to? And there was no guarantee we were going to get to an agreement at that stage, because things were up and down. People were walking into the talks and walking out of the talks and whatever else. So there was still local political sensitivities and alliances. And then within the Protestant Unionist Loyalist community at that time, there was still very much, well, increasingly actually, almost this sense of, which we see now, this politics of perception, that we're going to lose from this. No matter what happens, we're going to lose. And of course, as the DUP walked out of the talks when Sinn Féin went in 1997, that was being played on politically as well. You're going to lose, you're going to lose. And in some senses, it was quite difficult, because from a socioeconomic sense, communities like the Lower Shankill and whatever were losing economically because a lot of the traditional employment was going. There was issues around sort of contested warring internal paramilitary groups. They were being told that they were going to lose politically. And whatever came out of the agreement, there was always going to be a loss from, say, the 50 years unionist rule that you had from 1921 to whatever, 71. So, even getting to, and I suppose that's why to an extent the nationalist community keep talking equality, even getting to equality is going to be a physical loss from where that community were. And I don't think we were sensitive enough to that at that stage. And then, of course, it actually augmented over the next 2 decades. Within the communities as well at this time, there was a terrible insecurity about who had the authority to say what. And I think particularly in the Republican community, because as something like Sinn Féin was elected, they were sort of saying, we are the representative voice. Whereas previously, people had talked about participative democracy in a much general sense, because they needed the cover of the community to actually be heard. When parties then became elected in their own right, they wanted to control the conversation. And in some ways you can understand that, because everything was up for grabs in terms of negotiations, so they didn't necessarily want somebody from a local area putting forward something that might undermine the negotiating position. So there was a huge sense of control, and actually that it's reflected in that quote there. People didn't know what the hell was happening. There was an uncertainty of, well, you won't sit with government. Some people got away with stuff, and some people got their knuckles rapped. So who was in control of who said what? There was also beginning to be a slight differentiation between what was happening within local community level and the sort of more formal NGO civil society. And sometimes we talk generally about NGOs, non-governmental organisations, or civil society. But actually, those communities that are most impacted by the violence had quite different views from perhaps your big Save the Children funds, or those sort of organisations, or Care Separate Offenders and whatever else, that were worked on a regional basis and could take, I suppose, more slightly disinterested positions. And then there was the emergence of what I call the invisible interest groups at that time. Political ex-prisoners, because we still haven't got to the stage of their release, but there was a lot of political ex-prisoners, and the victims and survivors of violence. And the victims and survivors of violence it was almost like a logjam of anger and frustration, because they had been caught. I mean, actually, with both those groups, I actually managed the European Union peace funds for both those groups from 1995 to the Community Foundation for Northern Ireland. And I wrote to the Northern Ireland office. I said, look, we want to be equitable in how we distribute this money. How many victims of violence are there from the Troubles, and where are they? How many political ex-prisoners are there, and how many are loyalists to Republican? And they came back to both letters and said, we don't know. Why? Because of the macro government analysis of this is a normal society with a crime wave, they didn't keep the statistics. They said they didn't. So, victim, as far as they were concerned, was you could be knocked down across the road outside, or you could have been shot. But actually, because it wasn't a war, it wasn't put down as political. So, actually, one of the first things I funded was a research project to try and untangle, and the book that came out, Lost Lives. I remember just going through it. Somebody said that, so-and-so said that, so-and-so was doing that, so, just to try and find out, in geographic terms, where the victims were. So you have peace negotiations, and these poor victims and survivors were sort of saying, we're nowhere. We've never been recognised. Actually, at this time, during the 1986, there was Relatives for Justice, which had come out of the more Republican community. There was Disabled Police Officers Association, who were very small, and actually were looked down upon by the establishment because they were actually putting forward demands. And there was about 2 other groups, WAVE, which was a cross-community victims group, and that was it, nothing else. So the whole victim self-help groups that you hear from now, they didn't exist until about 2000 because they had been written out of the script. Which brought us then to the Good Friday Agreement. That first slide obviously is from Mount Vernon, which showed the, I suppose, equivocation at the time from the UPF, and the second slide is from, I'm not sure it's Western North Belfast, anyway, one of them, where again, you can see even within the agreement, even at this early stage, the differences in terms of interpretation. So what's the agreement itself? It's a great document to read. However, it has a lot of concepts in there that actually ended up as a bit of a booby trap in terms of implementation. And it was a document that was written by the civil service, based on the negotiations. So, but I do think that it holds quite a lot of elements that are very useful for other peace negotiations. First of all, the fact that it recognised all the geographical parameters of the conflict, not just Northern Ireland, but the Republic of Ireland and Britain. So Strand 1 was arrangements within Northern Ireland. Strand 2 was arrangements on an all-island Irish basis, the north-south dimension. And Strand 3 was the east-west dimension. So all the parties there could see within those strands something that was of immediate concern to them. So the Unionists particularly would be looking at, well, actually, ironically, I should say the Unionists would be looking at the east-west dimension. The Unionists were busy looking over their shoulder at the north-south dimension, and the Republicans would be looking at the east-west dimension because people always look at what they see as a threat. And it was actually fascinating because about 5 days before the final Good Friday Agreement, a draft agreement came out, which was almost a final document, but it caused utter fury in Unionist ranks, right across the Unionist board. And I said, what's wrong? Look at them, just stuff on the north-south side. I said, there was a big year I was talking to, God rest him. I said, they need for wiser. I said, will you look at it? I said, A is double space, and the east-west side is only single space, so it looks more. But secondly, it's things like, harmonisation of the Greyhound Training Board. Well, that's going to cause major problems, I'm sure, fishing, whatever else. But it was just almost like, it was the symbolism of it. It's all this north-south stuff, Okay. So again, how things are portrayed is really important. And I just actually on that, one of the sneaky things that Women's Coalition did in terms of its teamwork was we always, if we couldn't get formal talks with people, we specified individuals in our negotiating team to shadow or be in positions to pick up information. So we always had somebody in the tea room in Castle Buildings, because that's where you picked up all the gossip in terms of, so Pearl generally was from our Protestant leader, would sidle up and sit down with us, the Democratic Party or the Unionist Party, to have coffee or a drink with them basically. to see what they were saying, which report back. Or we'd have somebody, hosted. We actually shared on our corridor a photocopier machine with the Sinn Féin. Sometimes they get stuck with it. So we had like an artificial intelligence service for it. Anyway, get back to the Good Friday Agreement. So we had, yes, then strands 1, 2, and 3, and then we had obviously the structures, the Northern Ireland Assembly, and then the North-South sort of structure, and then East-West arrangements. The third one I think is really important for, I keep saying, places, it's not possible, it's just a moment in Sri Lanka, but certainly, talks came there, and certainly Cyprus. So a number of different areas, where there is split national identities. But what the Good Friday Agreement did is it disaggregated the idea of citizenship, what state are you actually living in, and national identity. So it was accepted that it was as valid to have an Irish national identity as a British British Unionist, Ulster identity, whichever. As you know, you can hold 2 passports here, British and Irish passport, which recognises that. So it meant that, and actually a lot of unionists were very annoyed about this, but it really meant that it allowed almost like an agenda of choice for people. So for argument's sake, if at some point, you get a United Cyprus, there is no reason why people couldn't hold a Greek and a Turkish passport, or have, allegiances to them that way. Or similarly, as I say, you could have thought the same in something like Sri Lanka, I don't know the details, but possibly. The third one then is the commitment in the Good Friday Agreement to human rights, parity of esteem, and equality. Now, one of the issues, I suppose, is that, unfortunately, that equality and human rights became seen as Republican. And as I said at the very beginning of our talk, actually the roots were much broader than that. And I remember, when we used to bring over Albie Sachs from South Africa, who was a wonderful speaker, and he was at the time the Chief Justice of the Court of Human Rights in South Africa, and had been involved in drafting the Bill of Rights. And he argued, he said, and Wolf Mayer did the same, but to no avail. He said, look, he said, actually in our situation, people that needed the Bill of Rights weren't the sort of our African community, but the white community, because they were going to be the minority. So the longer term, if you looked at the longer term, and this of course was very difficult here, unionists, you've got an increasing Catholic population, you need the Bill of Rights. But the people didn't see it in those terms, which I think was very unfortunate. And similarly, equality, you should argue, should be support everybody, but wasn't necessarily seen. The parity of esteem really was put in to reflect this exceptions of multiple aspirations, national identities, and clearly, as we know, it now has become a bit of a wicked concept in terms of people using it to argue with each other, or to see us as whether it's the Ulster Scots versus the Irish language, whether it's flags, different identities, but it was put in there to actually be inclusive. It didn't really develop as such. The power sharing governance and safeguards was very controversial. However, there had been a history of it in terms of negotiations from 1974 in Northern Ireland, and it was recognised that unless you could get buy-in from the divided community, you are going to get an agreement. Decommissioning, policing and justice, and normalisation of security were kicked into commissions. If we had tried to get the details of policing reform and the Good Friday Agreement, we would never got agreement. And of course, it then became very controversial afterwards, but they were put into independent commissions, so the can was kicked down the road. And prisoners was a difficult one, because again, you still have the context of that this was a crime wave. So, there was quite obvious after the unionist party to say, oh, why are they letting out? The the benefit was that there was a cross-community combination there between the Loyalist parties, the Progressive Unionists, the Democratic Party, and Sinn Féin on that one. And actually, the Women's Coalition came in quite strong in that one. And at one point during the process, there was a danger of particularly the UDA prisoners that were still inside the prison, undermining the Ulster Democratic Party and telling them to withdraw from talks. And that was through pressure of the DUP, who had themselves withdrawn. And actually, the Women's Coalition sent in some people into the prisons to talk to the UDA prisoners and sort of say, look, this is our perspective. And one of the things which I should have said earlier, that the Women's Coalition did was we refused to take a position on the border. So, of which we were slammed for, because the other parties said, oh yeah, you're fighting the peace talks, you don't take a position on the constitutional question. That's what it's all about. And we said, look, you all have a position on the constitutional question from all sides. Why should we? So we want to bring these other issues onto the table. One of them was the prisoners and the other was victims. I'll come on to others. So, and it was actually quite interesting because it was Monica, I think, May Blood, who's now in the House of Lords, who went in, and again, the Catholic and Protestant backgrounds, to the prison. And when they went in, the UDA prisoners were apologising for the insults that were being thrown at them by the unionist politicians in the forum. That we're very sorry. That's still abusing like that. So we had actually sort of parliamentary prisoners sort of saying, look, you'll be very badly treated. This is ridiculous. So our priorities, as I say, in the negotiations, really in the peace talks, leaving the sort of the border to one side, did put in papers on decommissioning, put in papers on anything going, but we were keen to try and get some recognition of broader participative democracy in the peace agreement, because we were worried about, which did subsequently happen, the narrowing of politics again to combative party political politics, representative democracy. So we came up with this idea of a civic forum. And the civic forum was to have, from memory, 60 representatives representing employers' organisations, trade unions, farmers, women's groups, disability groups, community-based groups, and so on. And the idea, actually, I drafted the first document, and a number of others in the team then sort of amended it. But the idea actually came from the Senate in the public parliament, which actually came from different origins. That was back in the 1930s, but did have colleges of voters. Except we then changed it into direct vote by women's groups, by disability groups, whatever else. That was actually mediated for the first civic forum through the Northern Ireland Council of Voluntary Action. But they did actually draw electoral colleges from the different NGOs, whatever else, and for the civic forum. As I say, we went and talked to the victims because we knew that was going to be a major issue, and none of the other parties opposed it. So we've got clauses about the victims of violence into the Good Friday Agreement. And the government set up their first commission that same month, the Bloomfield Commission, to look at the position of victims. And we also argued for the reintegration of ex-prisoners. I remember having some desperate meetings with civil servants from the Northern Ireland office who were completely against the early release of political prisoners. And they said, it would not work without this. But it was good having a voice that was not a voice that was associated with parliamentary organisation, putting that point. Because otherwise, people would have said, well, they would say that back, wouldn't they? We raised integrated education, and the fact that there was no sort of statutory funding for integrated education at the time. Well, what we essentially did was we sort of, where are the divisions in our society, the structural divisions that enhance sectarianism? And similarly, the issue of shared space and housing. We argued for a different electoral system, and again, we were drawing on some of those Scandinavian ones, that were more equality based. And we argued for aspects of the Bill of Rights and strengthening equality issues. And I remember, getting a phone call on a Sunday afternoon at home, because Monica was over for dinner, and it was Martha Polk, who was another unrecognised heroine. She was actually George Mitchell's assistant. And George would have gone backwards and forwards in States, so 3/4 of the time he was sleeping because he had jet lag. But Martha was here all the time, and Martha got to know everybody. So we got very friendly with Martha. She was another ally. But Martha rang and said, look, she says, George is drawing up now the final draft. She said, you could either have the civic forum or the electoral system. What do you want? And we sort of said, okay, we'll go for the civic forum. We probably should have gone to the electoral system, but whatever. Now, whether we would have actually been able to negotiate that right to the process, I don't know, because other parties knew the importance of that. So anyway, we got the civic forum. And then we were into a situation of the Good Friday Agreement being accepted, but then into the referendum situation. And that was very interesting, and looking at what happened in Colombia as well, because it was down to actually Quinn Oliver, who at the time had been director of the Northern Ireland Council of Voluntary Action. He set up a very effective civic campaign to fight that referendum. A lot of the parties were nowhere to be seen, because alongside the referendum, they were also going into formal elections for the first assembly. And their concern was on their own party interests, not on the referendum. And without that civic campaign to drive that referendum, I don't think it would have got, anything like the support it did. And then it was that campaign that got Bono up and with a concert, and they had John Hume and David Trimble to shake hands and all that. But that was all done by civil society, not by a lot of political parties that were involved at that time who were distracted. And the other really important point from this period was listening to what people were saying that was important. And one of the people who, again, I think has never got the recognition that he really should have is a man called Martin Malmström from the Republic of Ireland, who was advisor to Bertie Ahern, who was then the Prime Minister, the Taoiseach in the Republic of Ireland. And Martin was an historian, and he would sit down. Half the time he thought he was asleep as well, he closed his eyes. But he would listen. And I remember him arguing, he said, having a referenda on a simultaneous north-south basis the same day is absolutely essential. You see the questions. Why? Because he said, the historical authority, the legitimacy that Sinn Féin claimed comes from the 1918 election. On the basis it was the last all-Ireland election. And then you had partition, so anything after that was not legitimate. So he said, if you have a back-to-back referenda on the same day, that then cancels the 1919 election, because it is the next all-Ireland vote. So just having that political sensitivity meant that he got Sinn Féin off the hook of, an argument that probably most unionists thought was actually absurd, basically, going back to 1918. So it allowed Adams and McGuinness to go back and sort of say, we're having an all-Ireland referenda on this issue. So, again, just that sensitivity in terms of what can drive things forward. So I share with you something that, again, I found when I was actually painting. The night before the Good Friday Agreement, we'd all been in the place for about 48 hours. The catering staff had gone home because the thing was supposed to end on Holy Thursday. So they had topped off on the place. There was virtually no food in the place, except the Progressive Unionist Party hijacked a fishing ship van. The Women's Coalition had the foresight to bring up gin and tonic, and some sandwiches. So about 4 o'clock in the morning, I wrote a song to the air of Percy French, for those who know it, the West Clare Railway, which was called the Anthem of the Talks. Now, this is a test here to know who's been talked about here. So the first one, Breach and Seamus, what party are they going to be? No. Who is Seamus as a leading negotiator? SDLP, James Mallon.
Yeah.
So he basically asked him, would he see Breach Rogers all right? Because Breach Rogers was the deputy leader of the Labour of the SDLP, which was always complaining that she wasn't being given her place. The second verse there, well, that's actually still the SDLP, and it's Alex. That's so fast. The third verse, Party of Reason, Liberal What We Can. Alliance, the Alliance Party, who told us that we were a disgrace at one point in this coalition because we were getting too close to the Bories being Sinn Féin and the Loyalist parties. Oh, sorry, come again. Right. John Lewis is probably supporting my song.
Why would it be a disgrace to get involved?
Because he thought that the Women's Coalition were putting up too many of the policies that would have been related to things like release political prisoners and that, but they were totally against. Felt that we really should be more in line with more sort of middle of the road sort of. No?
No, we're just having some technical difficulties, so do you want to take a break or have a discussion? I'll have a try to fix them out.
We could have a discussion. Any questions about, or comments about what I've said so far in terms of the actual negotiations?
Were there actually many female politicians involved apart from the Women's Coalition?
There were a number. There were none sort of formally at the table.
None whatsoever.
The main negotiators were all men, apart from Monica and Pearl. Immediately behind the men, you would have had in Sinn Féin, Siobhan O'Hanlon would have been there, and Lucy Brannock from the Republic was their General Secretary. But they would rarely have been at the forefront. Well, like the sitting at the table, there was always, Martin and Jerry Adams that would have been talking. Unionist Party had none. DUP had none. The SDLP, it was virtually always men. That again, there were Bridge Rogers would have been there, but it was men. Alliance was male. Eileen Glass would have been there, but again, very much background. Who else would we have had on the table? DUP was all male. All the Loyalist parties were male, so yeah, no. As I say, when you, in background talks, there would be some women involved, but not when it came to the formalities at the table.
When it came to releasing political prisoners, were there criteria? Did you have something like drawn up that people had to fit before they were eligible to be released?
Well, what there was, they set up like a sort of a small panel, basically. So the reports had to go to this panel. It was an independent panel. In fact, Doug Morrow was one of the lecturers at the university was on it. And then I think there was somebody from the British side and the Irish side. So yes, it did have to go through a process.
With a question, sorry, for Monica. I would like to know what was the role of the media in the referendum?
That's a good question. The media was generally quite supportive in the referendum. However, one of the issues we always had with the media, and I suppose still do to an extent, is we had a media that was coming out of 40 years, well, not 40 years, that's 30 years probably of violence. So their approach was twofold. One was, to have this almost a sense of they proved their objectivity by getting someone that was very in favour of the referendum and someone that was totally against. So it was always quite combative, the discussions in terms of the referendum. I think that's still quite true. And also, and again, you can understand from a journalist's point of view, but playing on the emotion. So, Mrs. So-and-so, whose policeman husband was shot in 1984, what do you think of the referendum? You know, so on the one hand, the media would defend themselves by saying, well, we're just reflecting all the voices. But on the other hand, it did create a framework, which they still do, of, you know, of really working from the extremes, rather than trying to find the consensus. Now, one of the things that I think in terms of media that was really helpful, and didn't get much attention after, was immediately after the ceasefires, before actually getting to the agreement, after the 9 o'clock news every morning, they just had a little 3-minute, it's like a talk today that we get now, a little 3-minute slot where they invited anyone who's impacted by the Troubles to contribute. And that was really good because it was completely without comment and it went completely across the board. And actually was the first time that you heard those different voices coming together. But generally the media, they certainly reflected the issues, but in a bit of a combative frame.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I say, yes, so really this was commenting basically, the second verse was about the Alliance Party, the third clearly was reflecting on the Shillers being in the building, whereas Ian Paisley was outside. The last couple of lines of that was actually about Jerry Adams, who he had actually shown a group of school kids around the day before the final talks. I'm afraid that Council Coke was a bit of a play because at the same time as allegations that a member of the Ulster Democratic Party was involved in drug dealing. The next one then was obviously Mark McGuinness. Actually, the Mark McGuinness one, God rest him, was he was obviously a very good speaker, but he actually the reference of point was he came into the Women's Coalition rooms at 6 o'clock in the morning, and this was because he was also very strict Catholic, and of course it was Good Friday, and he said, "Girls," he says, "I hear you have fish sandwiches." He said, could I recite one of my poems for you, and then you could give me a fish sandwich? So we did. And then the other bits of it are in terms of the Fishers Unionist Party, because remember at this stage, Jeffrey Donaldson was on the point of walking out with Arlene Foster. They were both the Fishers Unionists, and they were walking out to join the DUP in protest. And then we go on to basically, yes, verse 5 was actually about the Progressive Unionist Party, and that was the reference, greyhounds and fishing horses, all decked out in orange, white, and green, was my reference to the initial draft agreement where they had cross-border bodies on those matters. The bookies in the garden shop in the Shankill. Yes, the other reference there was because immediately the night before the agreement, we reckoned there would be nobody in the bars of bookies in the Shankill because they were all up in Stormont, advising the DP and the Democratic Party, and similarly minded the Sinn Féin rooms. Then there was a reference to the UK Unionist Party, small party which was very sort of anti-agreement, Robert McCartney. And finally, basically, a reference to Margaret Pope that I mentioned, who was George Mitchell's assistant, and Mo Bodum. And that's it. Anyway, so that was one of our comments on the night before the agreement. And I mean, it was fascinating because it's just the sheer tension at that time, because the acceptance was that unless everything was agreed, nothing was agreed. So it would either all go to completely collapse, or we drove it through, and then the walkout from the unionist side, and finally, sort of going into the room where all the parties were seated around, and kinds of people actually came in, even people actually from, you know, who were just watching TV sort of came up, because it was just sort of a sense of old history. And I always remembered, again, it's the power of symbolism. You know, Jerry Adams saying, yes, but the person standing behind him was Joe Cahill, with his hand on his shoulder. And he was one of the guys that had set up the provisional IRA as a breakaway from the traditional IRA. So again, it was actually sending out that message, we're going to have to sell this outside there, but we're pulling the whole power history behind us, the Senate. It's not just one individual leader. So that was very important. And then we had the stage about the implementation. And one of the things that I reckon that we didn't do enough of, there was so much tension in getting these words on this page and getting people with different degrees of enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm to sign off it. We never looked at the implementation. And that then is where the real difficulties come. Now, we delegated a lot of the difficult issues, as I mentioned earlier, of policing, decommissioning, human rights. And it meant the coalition had then to keep going in terms of keeping tabs on what was happening in those various delegated independent panels. Because that's where then the details were being negotiated all the time. The second problem we had in terms of implementation, the Republicans, the Sinn Féin went out, and arguably, on any sort of historical basis, they did a major U-turn in terms of you sort of saying, okay, we still have an aspiration for United Ireland, but it's very much further down. We're giving up the arms struggle. There were still questions over decommissioning, fair enough. But we're accepting Stormont. We're accepting elections to Stormont. So, but they went out and they sold the agreement as a victory. And a sense of feel-good factor. Whereas on the unionist side, what David Trimble did was he went out and said, we lost. It's an insult, Now he did that because he was still trying to renegotiate bits of it. What do we mean by parity esteem? Or whatever, with Tony Blair. So his tactic was to say, we've lost, so therefore, Tony, you have to give us this, this, and this, because I have to go and sell it to my people. But the trouble is, if you keep repeating that we lost, and you're sitting unemployed in the Lower Shankill or in Mount Vernon or whatever, you say, hey, we've lost, And on top of that, you had the Democratic Unionist Party, who were saying that they'd lost anyway. So then people started saying, well, why should we support the Unionist Party? I mean, these people were right on along, basically. So how the agreement is sold, and we never talked internally about how different parties were going to sell it or not sell it, basically. We still then had, again, in terms of ongoing sort of negotiations and crisis summits, if the Unionists had this sense of loss, the Republicans always had about 39 different issues that they were happy to bring up whenever they got a chance in terms of the crisis negotiations. And they also were very consciously looking over their shoulder in terms of how it splits. We then had thrown into that mix this politics of victimhood. Because again, quite understandably, the victims were saying we've been ignored. That was then politically manipulated to, and the exact same thing happened in the Basque Country, where you had innocent victims against complicit victims or whatever else, and attempts to have a hierarchy of victims, and then saying, look, you're being ignored or whatever else. A very deliberate policy around that, in a situation which was easy to do. And we ended up in serial crisis summits. It was always, so the assembly was set up, then it couldn't meet because the unionists had wanted decommissioning of weapons. The Sinn Féin was saying, we're not going to take deadlines set by the Unionist Party, so the thing will go down again, and we face a direct rule. And really sort of, with on and off, we really didn't have sort of decent implementation of 2007. So you're going from 1998, 99 to 2007, a complete roller coaster. And that's not to say we're still not a roller coaster, but a slightly smaller roller coaster since 2007. And what happened in 2007 was you had the agreement between the so-called extremes, Sinn Féin and the DUP were getting power. The problem in those earlier days, the people that held the power sharing were the SDLP and the Unionist parties. So they always had somebody looking at them from further afield. But once then Sinn Féin and the DUP could come to an agreement, there was really nobody else further extreme other than traditional Unionist voice, which was very small, or some distance in the Republican side, that could sort of undermine the negotiations that they made. In terms of civil society, I mean, you still had in that period, particularly that 1999 to 2007 period, the Ardoyne, then Bryn situation, you know, you had the major issue of the marches still. And I said it was a fairly awful period, to be honest, that period. However, you did have civil society trying to keep the atmosphere, the ecosystem of peace building going, while you had all this crisis within the political parties. And essentially became almost like cheerleaders for peace. And that group that the Northern Ireland Civil Rights, or the Northern Ireland Council of Public Action brought together, that G8 group, you know, the employers, the trade unions and so forth, kept saying, we mustn't, we can't go back. If we go back to violence, we've lost this place. So, you know, and then they would use again the economy, the non-political stuff. You had business leaders like Sir George Quigley, ex-senior civil servant, Protestant background, chair of the Ulster Bank, talking about the importance of north-south trade. All those sort of issues to sort of say, no, there is still opportunities here. You also had civil society doing the research and development around peace building, concrete peace building. For example, now it actually was slightly before the Good Friday Agreement, the development of the mobile phone network. North Belfast started and then went on to West Belfast, you know, where people at either side of the peace line, very often ex-prisoners or combatants, held mobile phones to stop rumours. So if there was a rumour that there was a big crowd of young people coming down the Clifton Road to attack the peace line, somebody, you know, from the other side would ring and say, are they coming to attack the peace line? No, they're coming back from soccer match. But you know, but the power of rumour to spark conflict, if it's not nipped in the bud, was so important. And again, through those networks, bringing those people together so they could back channel communicate if their politicians weren't up and strong. Again, another example where a community-based organisation initiated talks with every division of the new police service in Northern Ireland, PSNI, even before Sinn Féin accepted that policing structure. And then brought in, on a back channel basis, representatives from ex-combatants, the IRA, ex-coms, the Loyalists, to talk to those police. That was done through every division before 2007, when Sinn Féin did accept the police service in Northern Ireland, to actually start building those relationships. Very quietly, done through civil society. Because the benefit of doing it through civil society was, it was deniable from the point of view of politicians. And if it didn't work, it was then. You know, so civil society, community-based organisations, and indeed community-based women's groups are in a position to do things and have those sort of discussions, particularly when there is a bit of space after the Good Friday Agreement. Documenting the impact on the ground of what was happening. One pamphlet was produced was the feud of the Fury, which was reflecting on the impact at the community level of a feud between the Ulster Defence Association and the Ulster Volunteer Force. And also then nuancing agreements around, in some cases, marches and symbols. For example, the Derry Agreement with the apprentice boys and the sort of the residents groups was chaired and negotiated by sort of, some leading business people and people from the City Council of Derry. So again, sort of being able to try and do things that if an elected politician had tried to do, A, if they failed, they would have suffered for it, but B, people wouldn't have felt as comfortable probably as talking to them because they would have seen them coming from a certain situation. But again, the importance of all that in the implementation phase. So it's not good enough to say, hey, we've got an agreement, let's all go out and get drunk, or celebrate, or whatever else you want to do with it. You have to get it through the referendum or the general consensus, and you have to look at the implementation. And the implementation is difficult, but it's still the role for peace building and civil society. And tactics can also be important. And again, these were two that I quite liked. In fact, the graphic and the picture is of the side wall of Windsor Women's Centre. And I put that up because Windsor hosted Mary Robinson, the Irish president, and as a result, it was burnt down 3 times. Because to an extent, it was seen that it was going further. Well, first of all, it was part of rumour. The rumour went around, it was based in the Loyalist area, that the bouquet was yellow, white, and green. You know, so something as stupid as that to an extent. Now, it actually wasn't the reality, but it was a rumour. But also with the sense of they were going too far ahead of the local paramilitary views of the time. However, in response then, these are 2 quotes basically from community activists in terms of the tactics, you know, that you have to think, again, think through the fears of people and what is the situation you're putting them in. And that first quote comes from about 2006, 2007, so it wasn't even during the violence, where so you can bring groups together, community-based groups, but rather than actually having to get them to talk to each other, where they still mightn't have the trust, you could have a platform of speakers. And the people, the community-based activists, would ask questions of the speakers. Now, what the other communities from the other side were interested in was the questions they were asking and the replies. And then when they started meeting and building up confidence, then actually enabling them to dialogue directly. But rather than immediately throwing them into a room and expecting them to be able to dialogue directly, as you said earlier, the process is important. How did you actually develop a process that allowed for people's sense of development over time? And the second one, which I loved, was this, seen it happen myself. Someone was actually North Belfast, where you have a community meeting, and very often in those days, the people that would be associated with the paramilitary organisation would come in and stand at the back like this. Everybody else would be sort of sitting there and be a bit worried about what they were going to say. So in this case, actually, the community worker realised what was happening. She said to the caretaker, as people come in, just put out chairs as they come in. So whenever the paramilitaries came in, they were actually in the middle of the crowd, rather than being standing at the back. And then she said, and we put the politicians in the front, so they were out hope that they were going after leave, basically. So again, just a sensitivity to sort of say, what can we do to make it more comfortable for people, or to stop people feeling uncomfortable in terms of influence. And what we've seen is during the uncertain period of implementation, which lasts to this day, is just because you have an agreement doesn't mean to say that those influences and those uncertainties at local community level go away. But people still feel, even if there isn't sort of arms directly on display, they still feel a sense of influence in terms of what they can say, what's sayable and what's doable. So, reflecting then on feminism and the peace process, what have different people told us? Well, a number of things. Cynthia Cockburn, as I mentioned earlier, did a study on transversal connections, but she was also basically saying that gender analysis is essentially a matter of seeing. It's a bit like what I've been saying about sensitivity to different views or different perceptions in divided communities. Similarly, unless there's a sensitivity there, things remain invisible. The way violence remained invisible for years. Similarly, the way that the role or the non-role of women in different organisations can remain invisible. I always remember actually going down to a community association in Derry Gondley down in Fermanagh, and we were giving them some funds, and it was all men, and the women were making the tea in the kitchen. And so she said, what would be an idea to get some women in the management committee? The chairman, he said, notice at the table, he says, what are you looking for now? We've got Catholics and Protestants, and we want women, he said. So it was a matter of seeing what is important. And actually, this thing about very often in peace situations, what's seen as important is the people that are constitutionally different, or that are coming from different perspectives in terms of armed violence, armed conflicts, or whatever. And they tend not to be women. So again, it's a matter of seeing. And then the point that was made there that challenges the binary distinction between war and peace. But, you have war, you have ceasefire, or you have agreement, and then you have peace. And the fact is that it's not as simple as that. It's a process. And it's a one step back forward, two step back process. And actually I brought along, two of them here, a pact that Community Foundation did with the Women's Global Development Agency. We actually did take Security Council Resolution 11, our 1325 as our pillar, just to annoy the British government. But we had, we produced about 3 years ago perhaps. And it was based on, meetings with 17 meetings with a whole range of different women's groups across Northern Ireland, first in single identity areas, and then bring them together to reflect on the 4 pillars of the resolution and how it was being played out. And a lot of them said they are now more worried about their safety and security in their local communities now than they were at the height of the Troubles. Because at the height of the Troubles, there was almost a security about knowing where things stood and who was your enemy or who was your friend or whatever. Now they sort of felt that sort of community certainty, for good or ill, had gone. And there was, there was more general tax, and there was and just a sense of insecurity. And also in some areas a sense of, and still a lot of, needing the permission of people see it as a high parliament influence. So, it's not a sort of a one-track, if you like, process, a linear process. And the point then that Enro makes there, that this militarism, or paramilitarism, or freedom fighting, whatever, that determines whose security needs are listened to. And that, I think, is very much linked in with what Catherine Rourke would say in her book, where she talks about the difference that was made between what issues are legitimately seen as public issues and open for negotiation or peace agreements or legislation or whatever, and what issues are seen as private issues, which tend to be family, the whole question, for argument's sake, which was very difficult for a lot of women, of the return of long-term ex-prisoners into the house. You got situations where, and I worked with the ex-prisoners as well, where a guy was in prison perhaps for 15 years, So he goes in perhaps after a year of marriage, where there's a baby of 6 months, whatever the hell it is, and he's coming back. And mentally, he's still probably at the age of where he was when he went in. He's still probably, in his early 20s. Whereas the woman has had to bring up the child, struggle to make ends meet, run up and down to the prison. So she's in a different place. Yet the normal community expectation is she celebrates him coming back with open arms. Some people did, but for others it was very difficult. And for the child it's very difficult. Because you've got a youngster, 3-year-old, when his father goes in, father's coming back and takes the paternal role of disciplining him, and he's 19, so all those sort of tensions were just swept down as the private tensions. Or indeed, the situation perhaps facing women that have been combatants, that have been in prison for a long time, and because of this whole criminalisation thing that the British government still have, they were coming out, they got early release, but they were coming out with a criminal record, so they couldn't adopt a child. And some of them were older, because on the basis of criminalisation, they were treated as ordinary common garden prisoners. There were certain jobs they couldn't get, they couldn't adopt a child, they couldn't get insurance, so therefore it was very difficult in terms of either opening business, or they couldn't get an HGV license, and it took years of negotiation to try and shift some of that. So that sort of situation in terms of the detailed implementation. And then, of course, the situation we have in all of these talks, that you get some of the combatant leaders who then become government ministers or whatever else, and the difference between them and the guy that gets out with no qualifications, and that then, and perhaps few facilities, and that then sets up a different dynamic. So the women's view being seen as irrelevant to the substance of peace talks, because the attention is focused on the constitutional positions, guns and explosives, and then established political mandates. Yes?
Hello, we have a question from Aoife. What happened with the Women's Coalition after the peace agreement?
The Women's Coalition fought the next 2 elections and was represented in the Assembly in 2006. Monica was elected, and then Jane Morris, as the other co-leader, replaced her from the Protestant tradition. It lost its seats in 2006, and I made a decision that rather than trying to keep going as it was beginning to get funneled into a small political party, that rather than keep going at that level, that it was better to disband and put its energy back into civil society. And so what we did, we sort of said, look, it took us 6 weeks to set up, but they always come back. Or somebody else can come back.
Thank you.
Participative democracy, because one of the first things that happened whenever there was the crisis talks over the Good Friday Agreement was the politicians got rid of the civic forum. At least they put it on a file basically and never came back. And then the point that I made earlier, the difficulty of trying to get a broader version of politics, because it's so fixed in terms of people's perception of electoral systems and the media and professional politicians. So, with a bit of hindsight, there was a poster, one of the posters from the Women's Coalition. We always tried to do something a bit different. That was the Take Off the Anthony Warhol poster on Marlon Monroe. The peace talks, the intensity of peace talks drew the oxygen out of that broader local organising. And as I said earlier, there was still local community women's organising going on, but it increasingly became a bit disjointed from the politics. And the Women's Coalition should really have kept more of an eye on that. Now, in fairness, we probably didn't have the capacity, but actually, if you were doing it again, you would make sure that you put in structures to grow women at the local level, the local authority, the local council elections, so that it wasn't just people up here, but you were actually growing people that could come up in the system behind that. And that was related back to one of the question too, as to I think why we took the decision to disband, because we didn't have that seedbed that we should have actually put in place. I've mentioned the importance of keeping in mind the technicalities in the process of drafting. I always remember one of the draft Good Friday agreements, we had put in a whole lot of things around women, and they never appeared. So we kidnapped one of the draftsmen late one night and said, right, we're not going home until you tell us why our big things are not going into that agreement. And he says, because you're not in the chapeau. Now, my French is limited. That's hat. So I said, well, what's the hat? He said, that's the Norman French draftsman's approach to the first paragraph of anything. It frames what then happens in the more detailed paragraphs that follow. And the first paragraph was all about the sectarian conflict, Catholics, Protestants, and Republicanism, Unionism. So therefore, he said, women aren't there. So we looked at him and said, and we used a quote that came from an activist for many years dead. Said, yes, we are, because women have lived in an armed patriarchy. So if you're talking about arms, we're there. We put in a couple of lines about women afterwards. But the point is, if we'd known that in advance, we would have actually made sure that the chapeau actually reflected something more in terms of gender as well. The importance of maintaining the team and broader participation goes without saying. The fact that we were so fixated on the short term, we didn't look to the long-term implementation, either in terms of the agreement itself or in terms of the future of the coalition. And we had no concept, I think, that the implementation process was going to be so long, that it actually was intergenerational. And so that we didn't really, think through the processes, relationships that were still going to have to be important in terms of building on that. The hand of history, that's fully there. Kept saying, oh, then I don't realise the hand of history, then went on to make a long speech about it. So the hand of history Transit Coalition is Monica and others. Jane Morris became Deputy Speaker of the Assembly at one point. Monica became Chief Commissioner of Human Rights. So again, some of those issues were taken up in other fora. It's obviously currently involved with the Fresh Start panel, which is about the demobilisation of paramilitaries. the international learning, I think, that was shared, we learned a lot from international situations like South Africa and Central America. This was a group of Iraqi women that came over here, and we have, I think, a lot of coalition members would speak to people from other divided societies, and in terms of the sharing of that learning. Actually, the very interesting thing is, the only place where nobody's ever approached the coalition members for any of this record is the New Women's Party in England. They never got onto the coalition. So it's almost the ones that are near you haven't come, but Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, wherever else, Turkey, we've had a lot of contact with women who are interested in women's politics. The bottom two photographs, very current. The SDLP there, flanked by two women, and then Arlene and Michelle O'Neill. One of the legacies, I think, of the coalition is giving space to women in other parties. Because what happened was that the other political parties started saying, well, look, this crowd aren't really necessarily a long-term threat, but they could be. That there's an element of dissatisfaction here that we need to do something about. So Sinn Féin certainly produced a lot of women, and a lot of recent elections, a lot of young women candidates, which is really good. And I don't think Ireland would have got to the leadership position without that coalition, the atmosphere that was created, basically. And similarly in some of the other mainstream parties. And final thoughts, because I'm conscious of time, see if there are more questions. There's a little book that I found once in America called Princessa, which is a takeoff on Machiavelli. So it's Machiavelli for women. The first one I quite like, given the coalition tactic of spying into the parties and trying to amalgamate as much information as possible, that the role is, first, a woman's strategic strength is to acquire the power of seeing, hearing, and knowing your enemy. And the second strength is using what you know, so it's gathering the information. And to an extent, women's organizations sometimes don't do that. They actually probably spend more time working out the details internally. They actually sort of say, who else out there we need to actually get information about? Because if we're going to make a difference, there's no point just talking to ourselves. We're going to have to talk to all of them, and know what positions they're coming from in order to be able to talk to them. And with the coalition, it helped actually, because when we had our meetings and we had people from both sides, and both the main sides that were divided between Northern Ireland, we had rehearsed the arguments from, say, the Unionist community or the Republican community before we actually met the parties in those communities. So we almost had some of the arguments half answered. Whereas if it only listened to people from a Republican perspective, or vice versa as a Unionist perspective, you would just have been in the same silo as the parties that came from that area. The second quote, the normal rules don't apply, obeying the law becomes a dangerous addiction, flaunting it is the only way to succeed. Now, that's a bit of an extreme statement, but what we were trying to do was slightly that in terms of saying, politics doesn't have to be, pro forma, as we all sort of know and love it. We can think outside the box and then see what aspects of that thinking we can bring back into a peace talks or whatever else, which has the potential to think outside the box. And the last one, it said that a woman is like a tea bag. It's only when she's in hot water you realise how strong she is. And that one I think is true, not just of the coalition, but also of women at community level. That when they're up against it, they can actually make a big difference. So I leave it there, and any other questions, either from our virtual audience or our...
We have a question from Rebecca. Avila, could you please elaborate a bit more on national cooperation with women in current peace processes in Latin America, specifically in Colombia, please?
In Colombia, certainly Monica has had 3 recent trips to Colombia at the request actually of the Irish government, the Irish Republic, that has been involved in sort of supporting the peace process in Colombia. And I know certainly the last meeting she met with ex-combatants from FARC. And actually my comment about the distinction between how your ordinary combatant, the conditions that they find themselves in, when they're demobilising, and those that are involved in negotiation comes from that, because she was commenting about how different the conditions were and how difficult it was in terms of the demobilisation process. But she also met with the police in Colombia in terms of talking about the importance of the policing reform in Northern Ireland, without which actually the agreement could not have been implemented, though it was a very torturous process, obviously because there was a lot of vested interest. In addition to that, I'm on the board of Sedation Resources UK, which has worked with a number of women's initiatives in Colombia, including the group that gave evidence in Havana, in terms of the peace talks, so that they're, it's at both levels. The formal level, through, as I say, being part of some of those delegations, and then the less formal level in terms of contacts with some of the NGOs.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, just, you were talking about the women along the border feeling insecure. Do you think that Brexit has had an effect on them? Have you seen anything?
I mean, whether Brexit has an effect in terms of women on the border, to be honest, I mean, I think Brexit will have an effect, but I haven't had any direct talks with women in the recent past. I think that the problem really will be what type of border Brexit will actually throw up. If it's going to be a hard border, well then I think it's going to be disastrous. I also think that Brexit will make a mess of the virtue that I said was in the Good Friday Agreement, of this menu of whether you're, national identity, but also carrying an Irish and British passport. Now you may still be able to do it, but say, well, I've got an Irish passport. So if I land up in Paris with, and need to go to hospital post-Brexit, does having that Irish passport make me an EU citizen and eligible for healthcare in Paris? Or is it because I'm based in Northern Ireland, which is still part of the United Kingdom, and is not an EU member, I can't claim to be an EU citizen? So all those things, and they just haven't been thought about. I mean, I think Scotland was sort of barely thought about, and Northern Ireland was just an appendage, basically, So I think it will throw up all that, and I think the only ones actually that probably would be celebrating our border smugglers. But they used to sort of say cows down in Fermanagh, when they were lying down, it wasn't because it was going to rain, it's because they were so exhausted going back across the border, picking up something. So, it brings back. So I think Brexit is a major issue, and to be honest, we're really not going to see the implications until we see what happens in terms of the British negotiations and then how the Irish respond. But I mean, even at the level of, there's hundreds of people that are living on either side of the border, what the other side, tax and everything. I think actually the Brexit, it's those micro issues that would be the difficulty, rather than this big macro sort of, sovereignty issues, Yeah.
Do you want to go first?
I thought you were
going to say
that. I just wanted to ask if you thought that the civic sector has really dropped the ball on some of the issues that the coalition has, and I'm thinking specifically of integrated education.
Yeah.
And the electoral system, and that people are very ignorant of how it works.
Yeah, I think the role of the civic sector since implementation, more recently, I think is an important question. I think it has dropped the ball a bit, to be quite honest, in some of those issues. I think the problem is that the NGOs and community-based organisations are very dependent on government funding. And to be honest, it gets to a point where they don't want to rock the boat too much if politicians aren't widely enthusiastic about participating in democracy or civil society generally.
Yeah.
So I think there is a danger that, they're not going to raise some of the issues like electoral systems or the civic forum because they're afraid of annoying politicians and then perhaps losing out on grants or financial support that may be available. And I think the politicians, to be quite honest too, have been operating a lot of the interaction with the civic forum and on issues like interracial education, whatever else, as benign apartheid, that the Sinn Féin looks after its side and the DUP looks after its side, and some of those other issues then fall through the middle, basically. And I think one of the biggest losers in that process has been women's groups, because they're not particularly seen as important by either side, despite the fact that there's reference to increasing the participation of women in the Good Friday Agreement. So, and it's not an either-or situation, it's a very difficult situation. As we've been trying to reintegrate, I suppose, or integrate political ex-prisoners back into local communities, in situations where they find it quite difficult to get jobs, but can be quite well qualified, they also have naturally been taking some of those community-based jobs, which previously women would have done voluntarily. Or, so there's a bit of a push out now. That's not to say that those ex-prisoners don't very often, they bring a lot, they bring their credibility, and they actually can achieve quite a lot on a cross-community basis because they can take that step forward. But there has been a bit of a displacement issue because funding generally has been reduced. And that, I think, then has caused some resentments. And as I say, it's not an either-or situation. It's not sort of saying one lot should get, another not. But I think we just need to be conscious of when we introduce policies or when certain things happen in a post-conflict situation, who will it have a knock-on effect on? And how can we deal with that and ameliorate it so that it doesn't become ammunition for people to use against the peace building?
How do you feel then that you sent all that money back for integrated education back to Westminster?
I think that's ridiculous. And I think it shows a distinct lack of bureaucratic imagination because, you can always find ways to spend money.
Yeah, so should women's groups therefore be getting behind that and actually trying to get that funding?
I think women's groups should be getting behind some of those big issues like integrated education, and shared space, and advocating. And to be honest, and I don't know, it's because I'm of my time, which was an unruly teenager in the early 70s. There's much less direct action. I mean, there isn't enough protest tickets outside Stormont to say, look, and to get media attention, to sort of say this is happening, because a lot of it is done at the level of the special political advisors and that not getting their act together, and then civil servants, back in a devolved power situation, not being sure what their part. So there needs, I think, to be more transparency, but it needs to be civil society throwing the light on those issues. And I mean, actually, in fairness, the media has actually played that role to an extent, but no more in terms of where there's headlines, But on the sort of the standard social economic issues that brought the women together in the 80s, those are the issues that are not being highlighted so much at the moment. The impact of the welfare changes, the welfare benefit changes in terms of people's lives, all those sort of things, which would have had much more of a sense of activism back at the height of the conflict.
Yeah, I know one of my neighbours is in a situation where she's being forced to go back to work, but she works in the care sector, but she can't get childcare. That's so, where is her help?
Exactly. So there's a huge number of social and economic issues.
Yeah.
And because of the ongoing crisis of the implementation of the agreement, which is still lasting after how many years, those sort of issues tend to sort of fall off the agenda. And again, it's things like social care and that are sort of seen as women's issues, so therefore of a lower set of importance that really need again to be brought up the agenda. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Thank you to the endurance of our virtual audience.
Yes, so just before we end, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Avila Kilmurray for the session and also our LLM students. And thank you to our webinar participants for joining us on our first webinar. The session has been recorded and will be available next week on our website. I will send you all a link. If you have any questions about the program or any feedback on today's webinar, please send us an email using the details on your screen now. Thank you.